When the clock edged toward tea time, Britain seemed to pause. Curtains were drawn, kettles filled, and the soft glow of the television spilled into front rooms up and down the street. You knew, without being told, that millions were settling in at exactly the same moment, the same opening music, the same familiar faces, shared by an entire nation. It's hard to imagine now in an age of endless choice, but once these programs were unavoidable. And stranger still, many of them have quietly slipped away, leaving only faint echoes of a time when we all watched together then there. To understand why those programs mattered so much, we have to step back into a Britain with far fewer choices. In the years after the war, television was not background noise, but an event, planned around daily life rather than squeezed between it. Most homes had just one set, often proudly placed in the corner, and schedules were short, structured, and strangely reassuring. From the 1950s through to the late 1970s, there were only a handful of channels, and each evening's lineup was studied in advance. You didn't flick endlessly, you waited. Families arranged meals to finish on time, neighbors compared notes, and children knew exactly when viewing time began and ended. If you missed a program, it was simply gone. These shows became social glue. They were talked about on factory floors, in offices, at bus stops, and across garden fences the next morning. Catchphrases traveled faster than headlines. Television didn't just reflect British life then, it organized it, quietly preparing the ground for memories that still linger. Those routines shaped how people related to each other, turning simple programs into shared experiences that felt permanent at the time, even though history would later quietly move on together, always. When we talk about forgotten television, it's easy to think of obscurity. But many of these programs once ruled the living room. On Sunday evenings, variety shows brought sparkle into ordinary homes, none more so than Sunday Night at the London Palladium. Its opening music alone signaled that the weekend was drawing to a close, and families settled in. During the week, gentler dramas filled a different role. Crossroads, with its steady pace and familiar faces, became part of the daily routine. You didn't need spectacle. You needed continuity. Characters felt like neighbors, and their small triumphs and troubles were followed with quiet loyalty night after night. Then there were the shows that turned participation into possibility. The Generation Game transformed the ordinary into something playful. Conveyor belts, prizes you never knew you wanted, and catchphrases repeated in kitchens the next morning. It wasn't about winning, it was about watching together, laughing at the same moments, and feeling included in something larger. These programs weren't perfect, and they weren't meant to be. Their power came from timing and togetherness. Today, entertainment waits patiently for us to press play. Back then, we waited for it. And in that waiting, something subtle but powerful happened, binding evenings, families, and even strangers into shared memory, setting the stage for why their disappearance feels so quietly surprising. It is only later, looking back from a world of personal screens and private schedules, that we realize how rare that kind of shared attention was, and how easily it slipped away as habits changed and choice expanded. Those forgotten favorites quietly paved the way for everything that followed, even as newer programs arrived, promising progress while slowly loosening the ties that once held evenings together across Britain. Then the fading of these programs didn't happen overnight. There was no final goodbye, no announcement that an era was ending. Instead, change crept in quietly, almost politely, as British life began to speed up. Color television arrived, bringing brighter images and new expectations. Editing became sharper, stories moved faster, and audiences slowly adjusted without quite noticing the shift. Tastes changed too. What once felt comforting began, to some, to feel old-fashioned. The gentle pace that suited a nation catching its breath after the war didn't always fit a country moving toward modernity. As more channels appeared, loyalty thinned. Viewers started sampling rather than committing, dipping in and out instead of gathering faithfully every evening. Then came the biggest change of all, control. Recording devices, later followed by on-demand viewing, meant programs no longer dictated the clock. We gained freedom, convenience, and endless choice. But in doing so, something else slipped away. Waiting became unnecessary. Missing out became impossible. Progress brought excitement, but it also revealed a truth we rarely acknowledge. Popularity doesn't guarantee permanence. Those once unmissable shows didn't fail. They were simply overtaken by a world that no longer stood still long enough to meet them where they were. And as they disappeared, they left behind a quieter question about what else we were willing to let go without quite realizing it. That question lingers, because television was never just about programs. It was about how we spent our time and who we spent it with, shaping the emotional meaning those shows quietly carried. Looking back, it becomes clear that those programs offered far more than light entertainment. They offered companionship. For people living alone, the television filled quiet rooms with familiar voices. For families, it marked the moment the day finally slowed down. Homework was finished, plates cleared, and everyone gathered, even if only for half an hour. These shows gave structure to time itself. Certain theme tunes meant it was nearly bedtime, or that the weekend had truly begun. They reassured us with predictability in a world that was often uncertain. You knew who would appear, how long it would last, and that millions of others were watching too. Today, viewing is personal, portable, and endlessly flexible. Useful, yes, but rarely shared. Back then, television created a gentle national rhythm, a sense that we were all, briefly, in step. That feeling is hard to recreate, which is why remembering it still stirs something quietly emotional, even now, as we realize how rare and comforting it truly was. Today, we carry entire schedules in our pockets, watching alone whenever it suits us. It's efficient, impressive, and undeniably modern. Yet something has shifted. We rarely talk about last night's program because we all watched something different. The shared moments have thinned, so it's worth asking gently and without regret. Whether convenience quietly replaced connection, and whether knowing millions were watching alongside US was a comfort we didn't realize we'd miss from those simpler evenings.